Hey, Mike from Archive Stereo. This is kind of, in a way, an equipment-less video. In other words, there's no equipment here. But on the other hand, it's going to mention a lot of things. I wanted to do a video from the perspective of someone who has been out of audio for 30 years and how it's changed coming back to it. That's basically what I want to talk about today. Now, I have to first say that I really haven't been out of audio for 30 years, so I'm not lying. It's just I've been listening all this time to two-channel music. I've never walked away from that and said I'm just going to listen to stuff on my phone or, on a, iPad or whatever, although that is part of it now, isn't it? But what I mean by that is I've been out of the active consumer market in terms of purchasing stuff, looking into stuff. I used to read Listener all the time, buy Stereophile wherever I could find it, The Absolute Sound. And I mean, I haven't, I recently bought a Stereophile. It's probably the first time I've done so in 20 years. But anyway, so yeah, it's so I've not been out of audio. I listen to music, and I have been listening to music most of my adult life, and actually before that, in my teenage years, certainly. But even as a little kid, but I listen to music at least a couple hours a day. There's rarely a day goes by that I don't get a couple of hours in. And I'm not talking about I have music on in the background. I mean, I'm sitting there, I'm actively listening to it. And that's what the purpose is. And it's always been on two-channel audio, unless it's in the car. But I don't count the car time as listening to music. Although if I don't have news radio, I have music on in the car. So anyway, all right. Long story here. When I say I've been out of it for 30 years, it's only as an active purchaser. So here's the thing: is like, what struck me as I went looking? I will say this: I went looking because the stuff that I was listening to, I don't know, I just suddenly got, about a half a year ago, I got this urge to think of, you know what? Since I spend so much time with this, and I've spent foolishly on other things, it wouldn't be foolish at all, given the amount of time that I have with this material. It wouldn't be a waste of money at all to get some really good, decent equipment, and especially as I'm going into my later years as a senior, it'd be nice to own. And I started thinking Macintosh, because I've always loved the look of Macintosh and the sound. And I grew up with a guy down the street who had kind of what I actually have now, although when he had it, it was new. So I've always wanted that. Now I've thought, well, maybe, kids are grown and all that. Maybe now's the time that I can do that. And but what I've been listening to hasn't been horrible stuff, but I certainly have never had like the greatest sort of equipment. For many years, most of my adult years, I was listening to stuff, at least since the mid 90s, listening to Hafler solid state amp, I think a DH220, if I remember correctly, and but the star of that whole thing was the Conrad Johnson PV1. I mean, and I got this from a friend of mine who actually used to own one of the local stereo places in Flint, Michigan. Anyway, that was great. I'm one of the worst things I've ever done in my life is sell that Conrad Johnson, and that was a tube preamp, and it just imparted an incredible sound, and it was historic because it was one of the early ones that all point-to-point wiring. And my friend who sold it to me said he thinks it was one of the early ones that were made in the garage. So I mean, yeah, that was that was a nice thing, and I am sorry I sold it. The Hafler, I don't know, it just didn't stopped working right. The PV1, I had to get the diode ladder, I think it was, fixed, and it was kind of expensive, but I don't know, I not having a really good amp to play that through, and the Hafler, start working so well, it was just, so then I ended up turning to vintage equipment. And what I was doing then, and up until last year, or up actually earlier this year. Most of the time, the Marantz 2220B. My first amp was actually a Marantz 2215B, so I love that, and I got my 2220 back when you could pick them up for $150. I mean, it wasn't much. The lights need to be replaced, but other than that, the thing still sounds beautiful. I've had some lower level Sansui stuff. I like that lower wattage stuff, not so much because of its being lower wattage, although I don't really need any powerhouse stuff in the smaller rooms that I listen in. But I happen to be of the old school straight wire with gain. The fewer knobs and bells and whistles that you put on something, I believe that is better. And the 2215 and the 22B just had less things to run through. Although, of course, you kind of undo that with having the whole tuner thing in there, and everything's on the same chassis anyway. But nevertheless, I love those lower wattage ones more than I have the higher wattage ones, and I that's what I'm assuming the reason is. Now, I've been playing these mostly for the past 30 years through a pair that I bought brand new back in probably 94, maybe 95. Paradigm 3 SE Mark IIs. They are not by any means a giant great speaker. They were the lowest level of what you could get from Paradigm. It wasn't the absolute lowest speaker, but it's just a two-way 8-inch woofer, 22 inches big, but still called a bookshelf back then. And it does need to be on stands, and always has been. And those were in my system, and I've even used them this year. But then a few years before, I got a used pair of DCM Timeframe TF350s. And if you ever get a chance to get some time frames or time windows from DCM, if they are still working, or even if they're not, get them, because you'll get them really cheaply, and you can get them reconed, and because usually the surround's deteriorated, and it's that's the biggest problem with those. The tweeters are usually fine, but the bass, and I think the bass is like 5-inch or 6-inch or something like that. It doesn't have a lot of bass, but they are beautiful in terms of soundstage imaging. They really do a great job. So anyway, that's kind of what I've been listening to. The only reason why I'm not using the TF350s anymore is on the right side, and there is a left and right in the pair. On the right side, I think it's a voice coil. I think the voice coil in the woofer just there's a certain resonance that it's doing this really bad thing in the bass, and for the most part, you can still use them. You just got to watch what your source material is. But if your source is going to have any lower extension bass where it reaches that, there's something. I'm hoping maybe it's something else, but I'm going to take those in and try to get them fixed one day, because I really hate to let go of them. Or it might just be cheaper to try my luck with another pair. Because again, you can find them like crazy, but they were amazing. Made right in Michigan, in Ann Arbor. But anyway, so what did I notice then? When it was really that I started thinking, it would be nice to get the Marantz the Macintosh, and I did actually. I got a vintage MA6100 integrated amp. It doesn't have the autoformers, but it's a very nice amp, and it does have actually an impedance switch on the back, and it's from 1979. And there's a few things that I wish were better, but it's really nice. It's working really well, and I enjoy that. But anyway, I started thinking speakers. That's what I wanted to get first. But this, really isn't just speakers is only one part here. What were the changes though when I went into the audio places? Either whether I was looking for, I was very interested in getting an MA 252 or MA 352, but gosh, the prices are just more than I can afford right now. But I was auditioning those, and so what struck me is, how has this hobby changed from 30 years ago to when you become an active purchaser again? And I think one of the first changes, is the biggest change for me, is streaming. I didn't know really anything for streaming. I have iTunes and Apple Music, And I was using a really cheap, and I mean, gosh, I think it's laying on the floor a few feet away from me and too lazy to go and reach to get it. Maybe I'll insert a picture of it. Really cheap, like $20, Amazon.com sort of little Bluetooth receiver. And that's what I was using into my Marantz, or when I was using the Sansui, using that. But I knew nothing about, like Wi-Fi or, Ethernet connected nice streamers. That was the biggest thing. When I went into places into nice showrooms, the first time I went in, I brought in this stack of CDs. That's how stupid I was in there. Although some people still have CD players, and I still have a CD player, but I mean some shops still have CD players because there are still nice CD players and transport. And of course, they all have turntables because that's what's big right now. which is that's not a difference because I'm used to the vinyl material. But anyway, so that was the big thing with streamers. I didn't know anything. I'm learning all this stuff about Tidal, Qobuz, Roon, Hi-Fi Rose. I knew about separate DACs because you'd have a CD player and you'd have the transport and then you'd have the DAC, and people were talking about jitter, and I could never afford that. So I had like a lower level Marantz SACD player. I think it was the changer version of it, the 5-disc, but it was nice. It was actually a kind of a nice deck. And then for many years I was just using a cheap Sony 5-disc changer. I never really had that great of CD players, but which I will talk about in another video about the NAD one that I have now, but. Anyway, streaming, that was a weird thing. And so what was cool about it, though, is that in the best places that you go to, they'll hand you the tablet, right? And, it's like the Roon interface usually or other interfaces. And then you just pick the music that you want to listen to, and you can very quickly, right on the spot, stream that music. And, so I'm checking out the speakers, or I'm checking out the amp, or I'm checking out this. In most of the places, I've been able to just get that kind of a stream, and so that's been the biggest change. And I did end up. I'm not even going to tell you what I'm using for a streamer. I will in another video, but I'm using a really, really, really cheap one, and it sounds really good. And it was way above the cheap Amazon Bluetooth thing that I was using, but that's for another time. So I'm now a subscriber to Tidal, and I love it. In addition to Apple Music, between the two, I can usually find stuff. I can't find everything, but some things I've searched and found on Tidal that I haven't found anywhere else. So I'm really, really happy with that service, and really happy. But that was the biggest change. Okay. But like I'm saying, you go into a place, they hand you the tablet, you get to do that. The nicest places will give you the tablet. You have control over it. I've had some where the salesman has control of it, and that's if you can get out of that, that's great, because having to tell them, it's the Al Di Meola World Sinfonia, what was that again? It's like it's just a little step in the way. And I am going to do another video very soon about source material that I really want you and hope you listen to, because I think I've got some interesting sources, and also talking about, for newer people, how to choose sources for evaluating equipment, but that's another. So anyway, streaming, the biggest change. Also for me, a lot of companies, and many of these are not new companies, but they were new to me because while I was reading Stereophile and stuff like that, I was kind of limiting myself to what was available in the Flint area, or maybe sometimes in the Detroit area, but mostly in the Flint area. And so while there were really good things like Krell and Mark Levinson and stuff like that, were around, and I knew about those, of course. There are brands now that I've come to appreciate a great deal. For instance, Sonus Faber, I'm ashamed to admit, I didn't know back in the day. And now I think they're incredible. I have heard I'm one of the fortunate people who has heard the Suprema $750,000 pair of speakers on a Dan D'Agostino system, which, by the way, I didn't know Dan D'Agostino, but he was Krell, and I did know Krell, and I know 30 years ago that wasn't an option anyway. But that's another new company, and just saw it. I would, what is this, But now, as I've looked at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's something more beautiful, perhaps, or beautiful in another way than Macintosh that's now vying for my attention. The only good thing about the D'Agostino stuff is I can't afford any of it. So, I mean, I could probably end up getting an MA352 if I really saved up, and that's doable. I can't spend $15,000, $16,000, $20,000 on an integrated amp. I haven't checked the prices. It's probably more. But again, lots of things I didn't know. PS Audio, which I've become a really big fan. Wilson, I didn't know those speakers before because there was no Wilson dealer, and I don't know how far Wilson goes back. I would assume more than 30 years, definitely. So now I just look stupid, okay? I'm going out on a limb just telling you, I just, because I started now going to Detroit and Ann Arbor area in Michigan, and these are the bigger cities, or at least for bigger markets for good audio equipment. I've been able to widen my perspective. And now, of course, when I pick up Stereophile, it's filled with names that I didn't know at all, and I think some of them are very new. But it's very very interesting. So again, the companies out there, I'm enjoying learning more about those. And again, I've become a big fan of Sonus Faber. Like I said, I've heard the Supremas. While I could never afford the Supremas, believe me, it helped to sell me on the idea of getting some Luminas. So my Lumina 2 Amateurs, which I so fondly mention, I think, in every single video, or at least they're standing next to me, and that's just their lower line of speakers. So but having heard the Supremas made me think, wow, the company that makes this, Talking about speakers, that's a third change, is I've noticed that speaker technology has always been, we put this in here, now we've got the thing that touches on the blah, 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 and all this stuff, and that's been going on forever. That's been going on since the 50s and 60s about this, but now, and it's not that there weren't small true bookshelf-sized speakers, but I don't recall them being as good as what Sonus Faber and Paradigm and so many other companies are doing with these smaller speakers that put out almost as much bass as, admittedly, not a lot of bass in my old 30-year-old Paradigms, but not only close to what the 8-inch woofer is capable of doing with only a 5 or 6-inch cone, which that's part of the small size in that. But so I have noticed that speaker technologies, all the technologies have changed, but speakers, seem to be, you can get a smaller speaker, and then of course go ahead and put that with sub. And that was the other thing about speakers that was a change, is that now everybody's talking about, you don't just add one, now it's talking for 2-channel music, not theater. Not home theater. Having 2 subs. That was a conversation in the video that I had on my REL T0 unboxing, T0 Mark III unboxing. But I haven't had a chance to evaluate 2 subs, but there's, mixed opinion on this. And like I said, I always came from the thing with the, the 0.1, right? Like the 2.1 and the 5.1 stereo system, and the 0.1 was the sub, and because, and I've said this before, that it's more of a mono sort of thing, because the wave is so long that it's not really directional when you have the bass. But then there are people, well, it does more than bass. It's how it complements the other things, and I kind of see that with even just the T0, even with just one in and then out of the system, I do kind of see that when you have it set up right. But so there are a lot of different things with speakers, that's a very different approach, I think, to subs from when I was there before. And as I'd said in the video before, I pretty much eschewed subs anyway. I wasn't really using them at all. One quick change to mention: way more online options to shop, but I really like going to local dealers if I can, and that's not at the detriment, because I've ordered before from online places, and also a lot of the places that are local also have an online aspect to it. Paragon's one of my favorite places to go to, but a lot of the stuff that Paragon sells is also available online. I've had excellent customer service through Crutchfield, excellent customer service through them, and I feel comfortable with them as well. And Audio Advisor I've ordered from, and their customer service is incredible. So there are lots of really good online options out there. And then the final thing that I want to talk about is money. By money, what I mean with this is actually kind of three things. One, lots of financing options. A lot of 6 month same as cash, 12 months same as cash, 18 months same as cash, 24 months same as cash, depending on what you're spending. And I've been very happy with some of these places that I've used, because the thing is, you've got to be disciplined. You've got to have your payments, because other than that, if you don't pay it off in that time, and from what I understand, I don't know all of them, but I think all of them, they reset back, and they reset back to a really high interest rate, and then that's going to be a problem. But if you have the discipline, which I don't always, but if you have the discipline to do that, there seems to be a lot more of those options. The other one was you come in with cash, or you come in with your credit card, or you take a second mortgage, depending on that. But there seems to be a lot more, and I won't mention the specific companies, but the one that I've worked with in a couple of different things, both musical instruments and audio, and when you pay them, they work out really well. By that I mean when you pay them on that timeline. So that's nice. Also, in terms of money, is just, yes, things were expensive 30 years ago. Things seem exponentially more expensive now, and actually maybe they're not. Actually, I think Macintosh is it's expensive, but it seems to be a really good. It probably kept up with inflation. But I mean, walk down the hall in Paragon, and there's $1 million worth of Wilson speakers in there, and that's not a ton of them actually. There's the Supremas there for $750,000, but not even just the ridiculous things. I mean, it's there's a lot of money. But the other thing in terms of money is there seems to be a lot of options, and there always were. And these companies were companies I knew before, the NAD stuff, Musical Fidelity. I have the X10D that I want to talk about in one of the videos, and that was super cheap back in the day. Cambridge Audio makes some great stuff. Eversolo it makes some really good, inexpensive stuff. And then the one that I thought was a joke at first, or it was like, what are people talking about? And that I have just looked into more, and one of the names that I didn't know before, and that's because 30 years ago they didn't exist, but SCHITT, shit. And, Steve Guttenberg is giving these things really positive reviews, and I used to read him, I think, in Listener a lot. And so I love watching his videos, and he's so thorough, and he's so knowledgeable, and so anyway, I really, and there's a couple other people who are kind of my favorites. That's the other thing, a whole other category. You have all of this stuff on YouTube, and I mean some really quality stuff. Paul McGowan on PS Audio, I love his videos. and he's actually, as I said before, a backer of the idea of two subs. Adrian Lowe. I think Adrian Lowe of Audio Excellence Canada is actually my favorite YouTube personality, maybe my favorite personality. I just love what he does. I love his team. I love how his videos look, how they're edited, all the things that they're doing. I love the equipment that he has. I love his Good, Bad, Ugly series. So that is another big thing there's no way that you have to buy equipment and go to get a magazine. You can in a second take a look, whether it's vintage equipment or whatever it is. I was already talking about Steve Guttenberg's Audiophiliac channel. I just listened to him for so many years. So there's lots and lots of really good stuff out there. So those are the things that changed over 30 years. Now, 30 years ago, you did have an internet, but not in the way that you do. I had some websites really early on, back in the day when you could submit your site to Yahoo and say, hey, will you please evaluate this, and okay, it's like, but anyway, enough said on this. This video has probably gone way, way longer than I think it needed to go, but hopefully I think a lot of the baby boomers out there particularly can identify with, now as you're getting closer to retirement and thinking, it would be nice to have that stereo system that I've always wanted. And, if you are like me and you listen to music, and I mean really listen, I had a teacher, a substitute music teacher in junior high, forget what grade it was, I think it was maybe 8th grade. And he was cool because he brought in a synthesizer to our class one day. But he said, and I already knew this even when I was younger, even when I was a teenager, a young teenager, he asked a question. He said, when you listen to music, do you really listen to music? And I don't know if anyone else knew it. I'm not trying to make myself better, but I knew immediately because I had thought about that even as a kid, that I couldn't understand how people can do something else while they're listening to music. I couldn't understand how you didn't give it your undivided attention, that the listening was the thing. That listening was the thing. And back then I didn't have very good equipment. I had a fold-down Voice of Music thing that I got from my brother after he went to college. So I wasn't listening on hot audio equipment when I was 13 or 14 before I could drive. After I could drive, then I started getting a little bit better stuff. But, that's who I think this channel too, as it's pivoting more to two-channel audio, for baby boomers or people who want to try to understand that generation of audiophiles, to be able to listen to that music, and enjoy it, and that it is the joy itself, the listening to it. And so that's why I say not out of audio for 30 years, but I was out of the market for 30 years, and I love being back. I'm enjoying it. I'm meeting people. I have to do a full circle thing to tell you this. I told you I had my Paradigm 3SE Mark III speakers, which I still use on occasion now, but they used to be my daily drivers for many, many years, and they've survived nicely, and they play and sound beautifully. And I'll talk about them separately at another time. But anyway, I was thinking of getting new speakers because I was using the DCM time frames instead at that point, and they broke down. So I go to this place, and I go in there, and the salesman looks somewhat familiar. I'm looking at stuff, I'm looking at speakers, and I said, yeah, I can't afford any of these right now. He says, well, would you be interested in anything used? So he shows me a used set for $500 of some Paradigm Studio series. Now remember, mine's the SE, that's the low thing. Studio was the big stuff in the 90s. And it was reasonably priced. They looked beautifully. They knew the history of them because it was an old customer. So I say, yeah, I'm going to do it. Now, I didn't end up going the whole way. I didn't end up buying them, and I'm kicking myself for not buying them because I'm sure they were incredible speakers. But Here's the thing. As I'm purchasing these, I realize that this is the very same salesman who 30 years ago in Flint, I had purchased my paradigms originally from. And here I am purchasing another set of paradigms kind of from the same era. But anyway, it's I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing. So it was almost like I had never left. Almost like I had never left the thing, because here I am with the same salesperson. And I did end up buying a CD player from them. And I'll talk about that again. NAD, very nice CD player. And I am using CDs more now than I've used in a long time. Anyway, changes over 30 years. Again, Mike from Archive Stereo. And please like, subscribe, comment. Tell me what your journey has been. I don't like to say journey. Tell me what your experience has been in if you've gone out of audio, or the changes that you've noticed as you go into stores. What are the changes that you've experienced too? If you've watched this far, I'd really appreciate it. Please subscribe. It's going to help out the channel. I don't have ads. It's not supported now. I don't have any. At this point, I don't have any affiliate links or anything like that. I'm just doing this for the love of it right now, and so I'm really, happy to talk about this, and happy to hear what you actually have to say. So, all right, we'll see you again.